the new pastors here. They're still breaking me in. But I know that Irv Bales needs no introduction to many of you. We have a long history together. I met him yesterday. And so, but I've enjoyed our couple of conversations. But some of you may not know Irv, but he has served for 28 years here at Sunnydale Academy. And I believe that's worthy of a Rolex watch, you know, when you've maybe just got an Apple Watch. But anyways, you deserve something very special. I worked for 8 years on Academy campuses, and those are some of the greatest years in ministry I've ever had, working with young people, and it's such a blessing to do that. And just a little more background of Irv. He has, when he served here, he worked as an industry director, business manager, recruitment, development, and I think he taught computers and government class, and that ties in very nicely with our theme today, right? Christian nationalism. But a few other things is he served faithfully as a Vietnam veteran, so thank you for your service, as well as graduate of Enterprise Academy and Union now Adventist University. It's so hard not to say Union College. Anyone with me on that? But just kind of comes out. But anyways, we're really appreciating that you can be with us today, Irv. And come on, join us up here, and you're ready for your presentation. And I want to have a word of prayer with you as we get started. Father in heaven, it is a joy to come together and learn and grow together. We pray that your Holy Spirit would be with Irv as he shares what you've laid on his heart. Lord, we need to be mindful of what's happening in our world so that we're not fearful, but faithful. So I just pray, Lord, as we learn together today, that you would allow us to see things that would better prepare us, give us confidence in your soon return, and understanding that you're a God who will never leave us or forsake us. No matter what's going on in the world around us, Lord, you have us always. Thank you for that promise. In Jesus' name, amen.
When I retired from Sunnydale, I got something better. I got a new computer. They gave me a new computer, which I needed. And I still use it. Although I don't know how much longer I can. I keep getting this message saying, you gotta move to Windows 11. And I'm not excited about that at all, although I have Windows 11 on my laptop. Thank you for the introduction. That was a little flowery, but that's okay. Okay. I'm not too sure what's going on. I don't think I'm in the presentation mode. Pardon?
Is it coming in slowly? So it's not automatic when you click it?
Oh, you said it would come in automatically. I'm not too sure what's going on.
I think you're pointing in the right direction.
It's not coming up.
I think parameters. Are you seeing different things? The screen's something different back there. Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe it's working up here. We just don't have that particular screen on back there, so if I get lost, you know why. So that means I'm going to stand over here so I can look at this one too. Okay? Oh, now we got it. Thank you. Okay. I always include a sources and documentation statement in any of my presentations. I don't like to have people say, well, where did you get that later? So now today we're going to do something a little bit strenuous. We're going to look at the U.S. Constitution and how it relates to the Christian nationalist movement. Do they really want to keep the Constitution that we have right now? Apparently not. And the first two sessions are leading up to tomorrow's session, how Revelation 13 fits into all this. I'm not going to do a lot of speculation tomorrow, but I am going to present a possibility. Okay? One of the greatest opportunities I had was after I retired from Sunnydale, was teaching at another Christian school, and I was supposed to teach economics. But after a year or two went by, one of the teachers had to retire, and they said, "Can you take government too?" So I did, and I really enjoyed that. It was a great opportunity. Again, this is not necessarily a one-way conversation. And if I could get a mic up here, please. So your comments add to the presentation and also lets me know that you're still tuned in. Okay? All right. Okay. One of the things that the Christian nationalists do is they often talk about the early founders and what they believed. So here's a quote that they often use. Our Constitution was made only for our moral and religious purpose, people. And they refer to that quite often. But Adams was not really talking about Christianity as such. He is talking about virtues in general, rather than just, we're going to select Christianity as our religion. Here's one that's really interesting. George Washington, it's impossible to rightly govern the world without God in the Bible. This was attributed to George Washington. How many of you think he said that? There's no verified source of him ever saying that. But you're going to hear it if you listen to much Christian nationalist material. And here's what he actually did say, and this was in his farewell address. Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. I want to say something about the early founding of our country. We're talking about the fact that Christianity was not mandated, but Christianity did play a role. I believe specifically that God influenced the early founders. I don't see how it would have been possible. Think about it. We've got a document that's 250 years old, and we still try to abide by it. How often does that happen? It doesn't. So I believe that there was a major influence there from God himself.
Just the Bible.
Pardon?
The Bible's older, and we try to live by that too.
Pardon?
The Bible is older, and we try to live by that too.
Okay, he made a point. He's disputing me. He's listening. He said, well, the Bible's older than that, and we try to abide by that yet. He's absolutely right. Thank you.
The founding fathers considered Catholicism to not be Christianity.
Okay. You have to remember that this was kind of a time of a backlash against the role of Catholicism or the Roman Church in Europe.
Right.
And so the founders didn't want anything to happen like that. So Washington did not specify Christianity. He spoke of religion in general as a source of virtue. The Bible is the best book in the world, Abraham Lincoln. They claimed, the nationalists claim that Lincoln endorsed the Christian religion. In reality, his personal spiritual leanings were quite complex. But he did warn against political power, religion being used for political power. The Christian religion is the best religion ever been given to man. Thomas Jefferson, 1816 letter. Nationalists use this claim. Jefferson supported a Christian state. Actually, as we talked about earlier, he did not. And remember the Danbury letter where he affirmed or coined the phrase separation of church and state, wall of separation. I like this one. You go to church to get your driver's license. You go to church to get your vehicle registered. Okay?
Here's 5 criteria for voting. Number 1.
All right.
America should be a
Have
Christian
I got
nation.
sound?
I'm a Christian nationalist. And so, yes, I
We'll
would
find out.
require.
Christians, get out and vote.
Here's 5 criteria for voting. Number 1, America should be a Christian nation. I'm a Christian nationalist. And so, yes, I would require a public profession of faith.
We're working on
That
it.
you're a Christian in order to vote. So my first requirement before getting into anything else is faith. It's religion. You should be a Christian. Well, what kind of Christian, Joel? A creedal, historic creed Christian. You should you should have to publicly affirm the Nicene Creed, the Apostles' Creed. Well, what about Catholics? Could they vote? Yes. Well, what about Eastern Orthodox? Yes. Well, what about Baptists and Anglicans and Episcopalians and Presbyterians? Yes. What about Mormons? No. It's a cult. No. No, they don't believe that Jesus is the creator. They believe that he is the first created. They believe he's the first created, but not creator. They're non-Trinitarian. No, of course, they can't vote. They're not Christian. Jehovah's Witness, what about them? Nope, they're not Christian. Seventh-day Adventists, nope, they're not Christian. It is a cult. Okay, but what about Muslims? No way. What about Jews? No way. Hindus? No way. Atheists? No way. Well, what about white European descendants who worship Thor? No way. Christian, that's first.
Okay, let's take a look at some of the other things that he advocates. You'll see it there in the letter. First of all, you need to be a Christian to vote. And secondly, you would need to be a male adult. Ladies, you would lose your right to vote. Thirdly, you'd have to be married. He bases his ideas on head of household. Only head of household would vote. If a lady became a head of household, for whatever reason, she would be allowed to vote. You'd have to be a third-generation American. After you got your citizenship, you'd have to wait 3 years to be able to vote. And a net positive taxpayer, that would take a ton of people off the voting rolls. Yeah. So that's how, far left this guy is.
Christians, get out and vote. Just this time. You won't have to do it anymore.
Is the United States on the brink of becoming a theocracy? Christian nationalists are gaining ground, pushing for a theocratic vision that could reshape the nation 250 years after its founding. What kind of America do they envision, and what happens to democracy when faith takes the wheel?
I'm a Christian, I'm an American, but I get really uncomfortable when a politician wants to hijack the power of religion for their political party, for their political cause. So I like to say that a Christian nationalist is someone, an American Christian nationalist is someone that believes America is a Christian nation and the government ought to keep it that way. If you just say America is a Christian nation, that's true if you just mean a majority of Americans profess Christianity. Christianity is the most influential religion in our history, our culture. That's all very true. But a Christian nationalist is someone who wants to use the government to keep it that way, to defend a certain cultural sense of who we are as a people, and that we as a people are a Christian people. That's Christian nationalism. You'll see it in the way people talk about school prayer. Back in 1963, the Supreme Court struck down the practice of mandatory prayers led by public school teachers, keeping a distance between the church and the state. And now people want to bring that back. There's a school in Oklahoma just this year that wanted to be a charter school receiving public funding and be a Catholic school. So they'd receive public money to teach Catholic theology. And that would, if that were allowed, it would take us back to before the 1960s, where there'd be a very specifically Christian sense of who we are being taught in the public schools. It means that I think the MAGA movement has a different understanding of what it means to be an American. I'm a Christian. I'm an American. I think these things are distinct identities, and my ultimate loyalty is to the kingdom of God and to Jesus Christ. But I'm proud, grateful to be an American. I served in the armed forces. I'm a veteran of the war in Afghanistan. But I know how to keep these things as distinct identities. I think for the MAGA movement, they tend to treat them as more closely conjoined. The Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, he tweeted out a short video a week or so ago of him reciting the Lord's Prayer.
Our Father, who art in heaven.
Our Father in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Superimposed over images of the American military doing military things and the American flag. And the symbolism there is of a unity between Christianity and America. These things go together, and they rise together, they fall together, and we have to defend them together. If we're going to defend America, we're defending Christianity. We defend Christianity, we defend America. And that's a very different way of thinking about American identity. There's a public opinion poll from some years ago that showed something like 2/3 of Americans believe that to be truly American, you have to be a Christian. I think that's wrong, but that is how quite a lot of Americans think of American identity.
What kind of a threat is that thinking to the America, to the United States we know now in the moment?
What kind of a threat is it? At the very least, it can be a threat to the idea of equal citizenship. I want to live in an America where all citizens are equal, regardless of their beliefs, their background, anything. And so Jewish Americans, Muslim Americans, atheist Americans are all my fellow Americans. And the idea of Christian nationalism, at the very least, in reinforcing a public Christianity, treats many non-Christian Americans as sort of second-class citizens or of a lesser rank. I don't know what the legal implications will be, but again, think about school prayer. That would be a mandatory Christian practice which sidelines or disenfranchises non-Christian Americans. But we can imagine even worse manifestations of Christian nationalism. I think maybe we see it sometimes in immigration policy. The Trump administration has made it clear they want to cut off immigration from much of the world, and yet, and here's where we're going to leave religion maybe and talk a bit more about ethnicity and race. The Trump administration wants to welcome refugees from some parts of the world, from Europe, from South Africa, from white South Africans. And so they want to reinforce a religious and ethnic identity for Americans. Again, I don't know how this is all going to play out in different policy areas, but it could be, it could undermine the notion of an America of equal liberty for all regardless of background.
How would you describe the differences between the Bush era and the Trump era?
Yeah, this is a great question, and I think maybe it helps clarify what I was trying to get at with the Supreme Court. I think the religious right and the Christian right, which really dates back to the mid-1970s, has always been a mix of Christian nationalism and what I'll call Christian republicanism or Christian democracy. In Europe, there are Christian Democrat parties. And I think the Republican Party under Reagan and Bush had that as its predominant element, where they were pursuing Christian principles of justice, equality, fairness for all, and the pro-family, pro-life agenda. And I think that all is defensively Christian democracy or Christian republicanism. And then there was the Christian nationalist position, which is not about Christian principles, it's about Christian power. It's about empowering the Christian tribe, entrenching Christian social privilege. And it blurs into things that aren't distinctively Christian, like immigration policy, like gun control policy.
I apologize for the length of that clip, but it said things better than I can say them. So voting is a sacred right, in my opinion. So I started to talk about this yesterday, but I need to go back to it. And that is the Bill of Rights. So the war ended in 1781, and we had a loose confederacy of states. So in 1787, a national convention was called, and the idea of the convention was we're going to remodel the Constitution of the Confederacy of States. 3 weeks into the discussion, they said, wait a minute, this thing is not remodelable. Let's just start over. So they appointed a committee of 5 to draft a new constitution. By July, it was ready. It was a rough draft, so they appointed another committee to dress it up a little bit, make it readable. And that committee actually added to it preamble, which was "We the People." And so that's when the Second War broke out. In order to get that passed, the new Constitution passed, you had to have 9 of the 13 colonies sign on to it. And everybody knew that Rhode Island was a rogue. They had stymied everything since 1781. They would vote everything down. And so there were 2 sides evolved, the federalism side, the anti-federalism side. The debate got so hot that those that wrote in favor of the new Constitution used a pseudonym. They were afraid of assassination attempts. And so the argument was the original Constitution that had been presented at that point had no Bill of Rights. It was just an organizational draft of what the organization would look like. Individual rights were not in there. And that was the argument. The anti-federalists said, we got to have something in there about individual rights. And so that's how the Bill of Rights came to be. So it was the First Amendment to the Constitution, and it started with the very first amendment said, Congress shall make no law. Who can repeat the 5 things it said? Anybody?
Freedom to assemble, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of press, which is speech, I guess. And
We have a constitutionalist among us. So, no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. I think we often talk about the establishment of religion, but prohibiting the free exercise is just as important, if not more. And fortunately, the Supreme Court that we have today has recognized that. Congress will make no law abridging the freedom of speech. Abridging means changing. The freedom of speech, the freedom of the press, the right of people to peaceably assemble, and last, the right to petition the government for redress. So if the government does something that steps on your toes, you can go around and get a petition and get enough signatures on it, it goes to the government. How many of you have signed off on a petition before? I have. Some of you may be aware of the organization that has become prominent in religious liberty affairs. Somebody help me out. They have a petition that went to, and I signed off on that. Some of you may have signed off on the Great Barrington document also. So now we're going to start looking at the radical elements. Number 1, amending the Constitution to declare U.S. a Christian nation. This idea popped up in the 1800s. And it was discussed a lot in conjunction with the Blair Senate bill and the 1889 instead of 1989, Breckinridge House bill. The Blair Senate bill was a bill for a national Sunday law. And the Breckinridge bill was a bill just to recognize the United States as a Christian nation. Constitutional conflict. The Constitution would violate the First Amendment, the Establishment Clause, which we just talked about. Congress shall make no law which establishes religion. How many of you know who A.T. Jones was? I figured I'd see a lot of hands. So he actually testified before the Senate Committee on Education and Labor against Christian nationalism in the form of the Sunday Law bill or the Blair bill. And his testimony was so important and widely recognized that they asked him to come back and testify against in regard to the Breckinridge bill. Okay? So A.T. Jones was very instrumental in a number of things in the early days of our church organization. Amending the Constitution to declare U.S. a Christian nation. Okay, for some reason I got that slide in there twice. So let's talk about amending the Constitution a little bit. This is pretty important. There are two ways to amend the Constitution. Congress can propose an amendment, and if they do, someone proposes an amendment, then 2/3 of the House and the Senate have to vote yes on that proposal. Then the proposal goes to the states, and 3/4 of the states would have to ratify it and say, okay, we agree with that, we'll go by it. Now, when there's the second way is the states call for a constitutional convention. And 2/3 of the state's legislature could apply for a convention. There's no time limit. Once you apply, the states can just keep signing on. Right now, we're in a situation where we have 28 states who have said yes to a constitutional convention. And we need a total of 34. Does anybody think that's a little scary?
It's not just for amendment, that's a totally rewrite.
Okay. So the amendment that they've signed off on is a balanced budget amendment, which is a good amendment. It's too bad we didn't do that 100 years ago. State of Missouri requires a balanced budget in their constitution. So now the thing about there's no time limit, they can just keep signing on. And again, 3/4 of the states would have to sign on to any change. Method number 2 has never been used. All amendments have come through the Congress. Method 2 has inherent dangers. Once you call a convention, there's nothing that says you have to stick with the topic at hand. You can do anything. And think about it. That's what happened in 1787. We threw out the old Constitution, said, let's start over. With the radicalism that we have in our country today, I would be very worried if we had a national convention called for by the states. Imposing religious tests for public office. He said you had to have the video we saw said you have to certify that you're a Christian in order to vote. And this one, you would have to certify that you're a Christian in order to hold an office. Some Christian nationalists will feel that way. So there's a conflict, and this is interesting. It's directly in the Constitution. It addresses this. Article 6, no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. What about the states? Let's say the state of Iowa. That's a good state to pick on. they say, well, we're going to require a Christian requirement to hold the office of treasurer. Can that happen? Same article, Article 6. This Constitution and the laws of the United States under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land, and judges in every state shall be bound by it. So that's where that Article 6 of the Constitution would come in. If a state said we're going to have a requirement for holding a public office, federal government say, oh, no, you're not. We're supreme here. Okay? Yes.
I've often thought that's the loophole in the First Amendment, though, where it says Congress shall make no law. They could throw it back and say, but the states could.
Okay.
They never have, but it's there.
No.
The same with the Second Amendment. They can control firearms, but there's nothing about ammunition.
He's brought up an issue that I'm going to digress just a little bit. How many of you know about executive powers?
Yeah, I think the 10th Amendment is as important of any.
Okay. So let's suppose I'm the president and I want to do something. I can bypass Congress and issue an executive order, which has the same bearing as the law of Congress. Yes, Dean.
We're seeing this happen right now.
Somebody, I need a removing mic. Thank you, sir.
We're seeing this happen right now under the issue of fraud. So you're hearing governors, like the governor of California, governor of New York, these governors, when they're speaking out, they're speaking in behalf of states' rights. There's always a point of tension between federal government and states' rights. And that point of tension should be there because that's what causes debate. But the topics being debated now seem simple. Well, who thinks there should be fraud? Nobody thinks that. But these topics aren't going to end there.
So he's brought up another subject, the subject of federalism. Federalism is the separation of federal government from the state government. And state has certain powers, and you'll find in the Constitution where it says several places, that refers to that as these powers are turned over to the states. Yeah. Okay, I'm going backwards all the time. Sorry.
If you don't mind, if you have questions, raise your hand. I can get over there as quick as I can, so everyone can hear that. Okay, thank you.
And be sure to speak up. I usually have the option of turning up my hearing aids for my phone, but this morning they would not connect, so I could not turn them up. And it doesn't give you a reason. It just says can't connect. Okay, we've talked about that. Government enforcement of Christian morality as civil law. So this one comes up from what I mentioned yesterday as morally our country is in a funk. And so the idea is, well, we bring in Christian laws, we could take care of the moral issues. So the Constitution protects individual liberty and prohibits the government from enforcing sectarian doctrine. Article 4 creates a national system of jurisprudence. Some words I can't say. And so what the courts say, the federal courts say, overrides what a state court might say. So While moral values can influence policy, enforcing explicitly religious doctrine or as law conflicts with constitutional neutrality toward religion. Remember, I said that the Establishment Clause is effective, important, but the end of that's just even more important. And fortunately, our Supreme Court has recognized this. Masterpiece Cake. How many are familiar with that particular case? This is Colorado, and Masterpiece had a bakery, and two gentlemen came in and said, hey, we would like for you to create a wedding cake for us. On top of the wedding cake, there'll be two gentlemen, not a male and a female. This was a setup, by the way. They were not even from Colorado. And so they sued because the owner of Masterpiece Cake said, no, I'm not going to do that. That's against my religious convictions. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court. This was the first time that the Supreme Court slapped down the Colorado Civil Rights Commission. They were very, very specific in the regard to this. They said to the Colorado Civil Rights Commission, you can't be adverse to religion either. So they used that second part of the Establishment Clause. And the same thing happened in the case of Creative versus Ellis. Creative versus Ellis was a lady who designed websites, and she wanted the option to not have to design websites for those who were from the LGBT community. And this is a very interesting case. Generally, the law only steps in when there's been an offense. In this particular case, she asked them to rule ahead of time, which is very, very unusual, and they did. And again, they were very hard on the Colorado Civil Rights Commission. Said, you just can't be adverse to religion. Limiting religious or political freedom of non-Christian groups. You saw that in the video. The guy said, well, if you're a Seventh-day Adventist, did you get that? If you're a Seventh-day Adventist, you shouldn't be allowed to vote. So they frame non-Christian groups as threats to national identity and have sought to restrict the influence of what they consider to be non-Christian groups. First Amendment guarantees of free speech. We've talked about that. Such proposal contradicts constitutional protections for minority religions and groups. How many of you? So James Madison said it's of great importance in a republic not only to guard the society against oppression of the rulers, which is one of the main things that our early founders wanted to avoid, was having a king and oppression of anybody that dissented. But he says to guard one part of society against the injustice of another part. Yes?
So this probably isn't the place for this discussion, but how does the First Amendment survive freedom of religion when there's a religion who part of their teaching is to kill every other religion?
Help me out. I didn't catch that all.
So how does the First Amendment survive freedom of religion when along comes a religion who part of their doctrine is to kill any other group that doesn't agree with their religion?
Okay. So the Christian nationalist has a problem in that area. They're hypercritical. And what they are agitating against, if it's given to them, it will be exactly what they have agitated against. It's actually just a power struggle. Yes?
Okay. 2 or 3 years ago, there's a pastor of a big Christian church in Ventura County. And he got into trouble with the county and the state because this is during COVID, and the state of California, in its wisdom, quotes, said, you know, you can't go to church because that's not an essential. And they said, no, we think it is. Well, the pastor of this church got in on one of the Christian whatever radio stations and said, if you don't vote for Donald Trump, you're not really a Christian. So I guess it's a comment and a question. Can you decide who's a Christian and who's not, depending upon whatever?
Brother Dean has a comment. Can we get the mic system turned up just a little bit?
Yeah, so when Craig says, how does it survive?
Yeah.
The whole, and this is a little concerning to me, because I think in the church today, we don't get it. The Bible's very clear. How many people are moral? None. The state there's a big difference between moral and civil. So I may hate somebody in my heart. God says I'm a murderer. But all the state should be considering is what my actions are. So if there's a religion that says we're going to do harm to other people and the government, that's a civil issue. No church has the right to be uncivil, and religion doesn't give you the right to be uncivil. But we are confusing moral and civil, and it will always end in persecution, because moral has to do with the heart, has to do with the mind. So I can't just stop at your actions. I want to know what you're thinking. I want to know what's in your heart. And to get there is persecution.
In a few years, you'll be able to know that. You'll be able to know what I'm thinking if the technology community gets what they want. Yes.
As was being mentioned, I thought earlier, this is leading not just to the convention, but to the removal of all those rights, which is pointed to Sunday law.
Yeah. You're probably wondering by now, why are we taking 2 sessions to talk about Christian nationalism, the basics of it? We're using 2 sessions to set the stage for the 3rd session, and that will be pretty intense. Here's an interesting case. How many of you know what mill nut is? The Milk Act requires that milk be pure. Caroline Products was marketing a product which was skim milk mixed with a vegetable oil, and they were selling it interstate. And they were not getting it was deemed unconstitutional because of the Milk Act. Well, in this particular case, this is where the court said, we have to protect minorities. I thought that was a little bit of a stretch in this particular case, but if you put it into the AI, it's going to come up with this as a case where minorities were protected. So it's been in case law, so to speak. Weakening or eliminating the wall of separation. This is another idea. Scholars say that ongoing efforts of Christian nationalists to reinterpret the First Amendment. How do you reinterpret something that's so plain? Well, we're able to do that pretty good nowadays. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Reinterpretation would allow preferential treatment by the courts. I don't know how you could reinterpret it, but that's just what the people that really know say. And here's where it's really important. There's a couple different ways to interpret the Constitution. The first way is the narrow way, or the originalist way. And people that subscribe to that take the Constitution as it reads. There may be some debate on how it reads, but they take it on how it reads. Now, the second way is the broad or the living interpretation. And in this particular case, the meaning of the Constitution can evolve as society changes. And this is the liberal side of things, I guess. I don't know any other way to say it. And so the makeup of the Supreme Court is one of the most important things in this country. If the Supreme Court all has the leaning for the broad or living interpretation of the Constitution, then you're going to get a lot of progressive rulings. Limiting voting rights. Last night, as the meeting was getting close to the end, I said to myself, these chairs are not as comfortable as they look. So if you want to stand up, let's all take a little 30-second break here. Stand up. Give your posterior a little break. I'm going to walk around a little bit, relieve my knees. Okay, I'm ready to go again. Christian nationalist concepts of voting. You heard him say who should vote and who should not vote. Pardon?
Originally, in the original Constitution.
Okay, he brings up a subject. What about the original Constitution? Let's take a look at that. We will. Voting is not the foundation of legitimate government. God, not the people, is a source of political authority. That's Christian nationalism thought. So government is only legitimate only when it reflects biblical law. Again, this is Christian nationalist thought. The will of the people is not a factor. We're going to go by the fact that we're now a Christian government. Okay? The constitutional conflict. We the people. That's in the preamble to the Constitution, which establishes the fact that the people of our country, have the sovereign rights when it comes to voting. And President Lincoln affirmed this in his Gettysburg Address. Some people put the two together, but there are not a lot of years between the two. Supreme Court, Chisholm versus Georgia. This is an interesting case. We came out of the Revolutionary War with a lot of debt. And this fellow Chisholm had financed some of the Revolutionary War. So now he sues the state of Georgia to get his money back. And that didn't go well. And so the court ruled that the Constitution is ordained by the people, sovereignty rests with the people. Okay, let's talk about voting. You raised the issue. So when the Constitution was first approved, who voted? Pardon? White males, property owners. Interestingly enough, freed black slaves were considered to be 3/5 of the vote. That's just foreign to us, isn't it? They were 3/5 of a vote. So under Christian nationalism, anyone who is of non-Christian persuasion would not be able to vote. You'd have to certify that you're a Christian in order to vote. And anyone who claims to be a Christian, but the powers that be say, hey, you're not a Christian, you're not part of the right organization, you would not be able to vote either. Who can vote by the Constitution today? All U.S. citizens who are 18 or older, not disqualified by the state. What would it mean to be disqualified by the state? Pardon?
Prisoners, criminals.
Felony.
Yeah, anybody that happens to be has committed a felony. In some states, you can't vote. That's not true in all states. In Missouri, it's not true. And you have to be properly registered. So that's who can vote. So after the signing of the Constitution, who could vote was determined by the states, not the federal government. And this is still a bone of contention. The states don't want to give up this right. And we have going right now the SAVE Act, which some of you might be familiar with, and it is a voting rights act, essentially. So the rules vary by the state. Typically, it was limited to white male property owners. States set their own property requirements. States set their own race restrictions. States set their own religious tests. Some required Protestantism. States set their own age requirements. States decided whether free black people could vote. They decided whether a woman could vote or not. And New Jersey tried it for a while and then backed away from it in 1807. What clause of the Constitution would be used to allow the Constitution to be amended so voting rights could be standardized? What clause of the Constitution will allow voting rights to be standardized? This would be the Supremacy Clause again. And that's what the fight over the SAVE Act is right now. The states do not want to give up their power of who can vote. Okay, now this who can vote, there's more amendments to the Constitution about this particular subject than any other subject. 14th Amendment, 1868, gives equal protection and due process, and the courts still use this amendment to strike down any discriminatory voting laws. The 15th Amendment, states cannot deny voting rights because of race or color. The 19th Amendment, states cannot deny voting rights because of sex, and this is the one where women were given the right to vote. 24th Amendment, states cannot require a poll tax to vote in a federal election. In other words, you don't have to pay to vote. I'm going to go back just a little bit. Remember I said that there were some things that the states had control over, and but any 18-year-old can vote. Anybody know why that is? It used to be 21. Why was it changed to 18? Huh?
Because you get drafted?
Basically, it's because of the Vietnam War.
Right. You're old enough to die, you're old enough to
Old enough to die, you're old enough to vote. And by the way, there is a movement to move this down to 16-year-olds. How many of you want a 16-year-old determining the direction of our country? That's a pretty crazy thought. And then there's the 26th Amendment. This is the last one regarding voting rights. The use of force. Summary quotes from Christian nationalists on the use of force. This is interesting. As a whole, we in our church, we do not believe in the use of force. We know that God never believed in the use of force. If he did, he would have taken care of Lucifer right away. So here we have this R.G.A. Rushdoony. Here's what he says. He teaches that Christian government has a duty to use force in the case of what he considers to be a biblical crime. Gary North argues that biblical law requires the use of force. Stephen Wolfe, he's the one that wrote, which book did he write? The Cause for Christian Nationalism. Argues that a Christian magistrate may use force to maintain Christian order. Douglas Wilson teaches that civil rulers are ordained by God to bear the sword, and that Christian rule may require coercive enforcement. We'll be talking more about that tomorrow. Okay. That's my session for today. If we've got comments, we've got time for that. Okay.
You touched on the subject of, and the word will escape me, but what Trump uses to get across what he wants, executive orders. How does that fall, and how much does that accomplish, and how much legalism, or not legalism, but how much effectiveness does that actually create?
Can somebody repeat that question for me a little louder?
There's a lot of executive orders going out.
Yeah.
How much weight do those actually carry?
Executive orders are an interesting thing. If the people were sovereign, I'm not too sure that we should have executive orders. Are there times when it might be necessary? Possibly. I'm going to go back to COVID. The president never issued any executive orders in regard to COVID, but he did have a lot of influence in regard to what was going on. I may be open to correction on that. Dean?
Yeah, I certainly have limited understanding. But executive orders' intent is never to become the law of the land. Executive orders, the reason they place the ability for executive orders, because an action may need to be taken, but yet it's still at some point going to have to go to Congress. And that's what's being argued about right now with Iraq. In other words, it's an executive order that has the conflict with Iraq, and now there's a side saying, wait a minute, you can't just carry on. It's hypocritical because they did the same thing with Vietnam. It was done through executive orders, went on for 10, 12 years, 15 years. So executive orders in a proper setting when they're challenged is a good idea because we may need an action, but it's to buy time, not make law of the land.
Okay, so in the case of COVID, there's no way they could have got some of those things through Congress. And probably right now, there's no way you could have got a congressional action saying, hey, let's go to war in Iran. That's probably not going to happen too. Our Congress is too divided. I like the idea that executive orders ought to be followed up by congressional approval or disapproval, whatever it might be. Yeah. I think the executive order thing is something that I know that Mrs. White says that our country will repudiate all the constitutional laws, but we may not have the Congress doing that. We could have somebody else doing that, particularly under you've introduced another concept, and that is when the founders put together the three parts of our government, the executive, the congressional, and the judicial branch, they never intended that the executive power be as strong as it is today. And they never intended that the federal government be as strong as it is today. Their intention was that states would take the lead, but there's been a usurpation of power. And that usurpation of power started or was exacerbated by the Great Depression. Yes. I got Dean wound up, okay?
You mentioned several court cases. The current Supreme Court seems to be upholding MAGA, what Trump does now. I believe they said he couldn't put in place tariffs, but I'm asking you to use a crystal ball, but it seems like it's a pretty conservative court. Are they more likely to, because they have the right of judicial review, they can strike down laws or executive orders and have, but are they willing to do that? This is the next $64 question.
I'm not going to speculate on which way the Supreme Court's going to go, because it's hard to decide. We do know that we have a very strong liberal side in the court right now, led by two women who are very strong on progressivism. Yes.
Well, on a much smaller scale, several years ago in our local Monroe City business, they were discussing what a nuisance is. And they came out with a nuisance is whatever people decide.
Yeah. And so that's played a role in the Roe versus Wade, because the people's sovereignty may or may not be the rule of the land. Yes.
Yeah, sorry, this is going to appear critical, but it's historical. Thomas Jefferson said that every shackle that will be broken must be broken now. Speaking of the revolution. At the end of this conflict, we will never arise again to address our rights, because people will lose themselves in the making of money. And what is happening? Why do we have ineffective leadership? They've lost themselves in making money. The number one goal of any organization is protect the organization. So if I'm an elected official, unless I make an intentional decision, my number one goal is get reelected and bend every energy to do that. The outcome of that will always be a dictator. And Rome was a proof of that. Long before they had Julius Caesar, they had the ability to appoint a dictator that when they saw a national crisis come, that their representatives, tribunals, were so ineffective, were so corrupt, were so self-serving, that what they finally did was they said, okay, we're going to appoint this man. He will be dictator. He takes control of everything. When he settles the issue, he'll turn it all back over.
Okay.
The trouble is, it never got turned back over.
So you're suggesting that, I think you're suggesting that history might repeat itself. Okay? All right. All right, I'm going to close it down and give you a little extra break time. Thanks for coming. Tomorrow will be Revelation 13 and Christian nationalism. You all have a good day.